I have a very high fever. I should see a doctor. I ought to see a doctor. Or I had better see a doctor. Hello everyone, my name is Ehab and this is English with Ehab. The topic today is going to be modals. I'm going to continue with the series on modals. Today's modal is going to be should, ought to, and had better. So it's actually not one modal, it's going to be three modals. You will find with these modals that you guys can use them in the same way, except for had better. Had better is a little bit different. And I'm going to explain how we can use had better. So let's not waste any time. Why don't we get to the board, take a look at the example, how we use these particular modals, and then in conclusion, we will see what we've learned. Okay, let's go. Okay, on the board right behind me are the uses for the modals should, ought to, and had better. So the first one, advice. When you give somebody advice, you are giving them a suggestion. You are telling them how to do something. You are giving them ideas for things. When you do that, you guys can use should and ought to. For example, if I'm talking to somebody and I say, if you feel tired, you should or you ought to take a nap. I'm giving them an idea. In this case, there is no difference in the meaning. Should and ought to are both the same. There's no difference in meaning. I would say that at least in America, should is probably more common. You won't find as many people using ought to as much as you use should, but nonetheless, they mean the same thing. If I'm talking to my students and I say the exam will be hard, you should or you ought to study more. Studying is good, but if the exam is going to be especially challenging, then I will tell them, try to review a little bit extra. Try to study, who knows, maybe a half hour more, maybe an hour more. So, first way that we use should and ought to is for advice. Now, there is a second way that we use these modals, and that is for expectation. Expectation is when you are very sure something will happen. We use this for future. For example, Sarah is very intelligent. If I know this information, then I can use should and ought to. She should or ought to do well on the exam. That's what I expect to happen because I have this information here, which is that she is very intelligent. So it's kind of like a guess, but you're making a guess based on information. And again, it's about 90% sure. Let's take a look at number two. Tom is very wealthy, which means he is rich. He has a lot of money. He should or ought to be able to afford a luxurious home. So I expect him to be able to buy a luxurious home if he wants one. It is up to him. So this is the second reason why we use it. Okay, when you are giving somebody a warning, you are basically telling someone something bad will happen if you do something or if you don't do something. In this example, now we can use a stronger modal, which is had better. So let's take a look at this example. If I am talking to somebody and I say, you have a very high fever, I can give advice. I can use the modals that I've used before. You should or you ought to see a doctor. Okay? I can say what we've learned before, but we can use a stronger modal. You have a very high fever. You had better see a doctor. The reason I can use a stronger modal here is because if your fever is really high and you do not see a doctor, there is something negative that can happen. There could be a negative consequence or a consequence of something that could happen to a person who does not see a doctor and does not seek medical help. So when you are giving a warning, you guys can use should, you can use ought to, but you can also use had better. Okay, in the conclusion, I will put some sentences on the board. We are going to try to complete them with these modals, and also we are going to try to determine what the meaning is. Is it advice? Is it expectation? Or is it a warning? Okay, so let's go ahead and get to the conclusion. Okay, on the board right behind me are small dialogues that I put together, and then at certain points there are going to be blanks. We have to decide at home which modal we are going to use. That's number one. But the second thing that I want you guys to try is to try to figure out what the meaning is. Because if you figure out the meaning of the sentence or what the person is trying to say, then it'll be easier for you to figure out which modal you want to use. So let's go with number one. And again, we have two people speaking. We have A and we have B. So let's try number one. A says, "You are driving very fast." B doesn't care and says, "It's okay." A says, "No, it is not okay. It's raining and the road is very slippery. You blank, slow down. You could get in an accident if you don't." Okay, which modal do you think would be the best answer for this one? We can use all of them, okay? But there's probably one modal that would be a better modal to use in this particular dialogue. Should, ought to, had better. If you said had better, you are correct. Okay. Had better would probably be a good modal to use here. Why? Because it seems that A is giving B a warning. A is telling B that if you do not slow down, there is a chance that you could get into an accident because the road is very slippery from all of the water from the rain. So here you guys can use should, you can use ought to, but don't be afraid to use had better. If you are giving somebody a warning and you want to try to speak in very strong terms, don't be afraid to use that particular modal. Okay, let's go to number two. Again, we have A and B. A says, "I just tried the new Italian restaurant and it's great." B says, "Wow, I love Italian food." A says, "You blank go there. You will love it." What do you think we should put here? This one seems like it's just advice. And remember, for advice, we can say, you should, you ought to, if you guys want to use that modal, okay? Meaning is advice. This is not a warning. A is simply letting B know that the restaurant is great, and if you do love Italian food, I think it's a good idea for you to go to this restaurant and try it out, okay? Okay, number three. We have A and B again. A says, "Did you see the game last night?" B says, "Yeah, the Lakers played great." If you guys don't know what Lakers are a famous basketball team in America. They are my favorite team, just to let you know. They're a very popular team in Los Angeles, and they have won many times. So B says, yeah, the Lakers played great. A, they have such good players. Their offense is great. They play very good defense. B says, I agree. The Lakers blank win the championship this year. The Lakers should. The Lakers ought to. Okay. Now, what do you think the meaning is here of B? What is B trying to say? How are they using these modals? Okay, it's not advice. Now it's expectation. Okay, it is not advice. B is not giving the Lakers an idea. No, B is basically saying, based on some information, that the Lakers are probably going to win the championship, the final game of the competition at the end of the year, because of all of this information that we have. We have good players, very good offense. That means they can score points. They play good defense, which means they can stop the other team. So keep in mind, this is not advice. This is expectation. Expectation. I hope you guys learned something today. Please be on the lookout for the next video. And again, if you did enjoy this video, please like and possibly subscribe to the channel if you can. Until the next time, keep on speaking English. Bye-bye for now.